Hello and welcome live from Tehran. You've tuned into Press TV's World News. Thanks so much for joining us. While the U.S. House of Representatives has voted in favor of keeping the notorious Guantanamo Bay prison open for an indefinite period of time. Now, the vote has upheld the current law that blocks the use of American taxpayers' money to build another prison or transfer Guantanamo detainees to U.S. soil. The bill will be put to vote by the full chamber in the summer. Now, the decision by the House runs against President Barack Obama's remarks last month about his willingness to close the facility. This as the hunger strike by 130 out of the 166 inmates at the camp enters its fourth consecutive month. Since February, the striking detainees have stopped eating in protest of prison conditions and their indefinite detention. The U.S. government has instructed doctors to force feed the hunger strikers through their nose to keep them alive, a procedure that amounts to torture. Let's switch over to Calgary, Canada. Joined by Press TV's correspondent Joshua Blakeney. Hi, Joshua. Joshua, this situation, basically that now the U.S. House of Representatives voting to keep this prison open when the foundation of the prison to begin with is illegal, and the way that they, of course, had kidnapped people and taken them there. How do you see this happening right now? How could, like the House of Representatives, basically say it's okay and continue to give the okay for it to continue to happen?
Hi, Marzia. Yeah, well, we have to remember the House of Representatives is part of the U.S. Congress, and there's a widespread perception that the Congress is more aligned with the national interests of Israel than with the national interests of the United States. And so it could be that Barack Obama was being sincere when he said in his speech a couple of weeks ago that he would like to close down Guantanamo Bay, because there is a perception that Barack Obama deep down is aligned with what's known as the realist faction of in international relations, the faction of the U.S. Ruling elite that actually wants to foment stability in the Middle East, wants to appease the Muslim world. And yet the U.S. Congress, which is relied upon for laws to be enacted, has more or less been bought and paid for by the Zionist entity. And so as a result, you may have Obama saying on one hand, we want to close down Guantanamo Bay, but on the other, can he get that through Congress? We have to remember, of course, that part of the war on terrorism mythology was really sustained by the creation of Guantanamo Bay, this idea that these Muslims are so crazy they can't be brought to regular U.S. courts. And of course, time and time again, when inmates are released from Guantanamo Bay, they're actually being exonerated. Regular courts, be it in the United Kingdom or even here in Canada, there's the regular courts, when they see the case against these alleged terror suspects, that it falls apart and they're exculpated. And so part of sustaining the war on terrorist mythology, and of course the notion that Muslims did 9/11, that external radical Islam was responsible for 9/11, is keeping open Guantanamo Bay, because polls have shown now that throughout the world, that in Germany recently there was a poll saying that 89% of Germans disbelieve the official story of 9/11. In the US, it's about 40% at least. And of course, creating Guantanamo Bay, torturing people like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to get confessions about 9/11 was a big role that Guantanamo Bay played. So you can see how in Tel Aviv, they're very much keen to see Guantanamo Bay stay open in order to sustain this idea that the citizens of the United States have a terrorist threat posed against them, when in reality you're more likely to die statistically from lightning than die from terrorism. So we have to view Guantanamo Bay basically as being a key prop in political theater, in creating this kind of demonology that, that Islam is threatening the United States, and these Muslims are so crazy that they can't be brought onto US soil and put through the regular court system, and put in regular US prisons. And as I say, time and time again, when you've seen inmates released from Guantanamo Bay and they've gone to their home countries like the United Kingdom, they've been reprieved because there's no case against them. And that's a big lie that Israel and its puppets in the U.S. Congress don't want to be revealed.
Well, the irony, Joshua, of all of this, they're talking about extending basically the prison and not closing it down at a time when the majority of the prisoners are on a hunger strike and basically in very, very difficult situations. Majority of them have not been charged. Where's the debate? Where's the political debate talking about why these prisoners are being held indefinitely without even being charged? I mean, it's just void from the political scene in the United States. Why is that the case?
Well, there is a perception that the same people who control the congresspersons in the U.S. Congress also control much of the U.S. media, and so they employ censorship by omission. There's this great tragedy going on in Guantanamo Bay, and yet it's not talked about in the U.S. media. So the citizens of the U.S. have to seek out alternative media, such as Press TV, in order to hear the truth about this. I mean, many don't know that 30 children were held in Guantanamo Bay. I recently read an appraisal of Guantanamo Bay by Professor Norman Finkelstein. He was just going through the statistics that 30 children were held, and one of them came back to Canada recently, Omar Khadr, who was kidnapped from Afghanistan as a 15-year-old child soldier. And rather being treated as a victim of war, as a child soldier ought to, he was locked up. And it's the same thing in Canada. They've straight away incarcerated him and thrown him in prison. And he's trying to get his so-called confessions commuted, because he says, look, this was a kangaroo court. He confessed to war crimes, ironically, even though he was someone who was a victim of war crimes, in these kangaroo courts in Guantanamo Bay. But it's the same thing in Canada. You see this neoconservatives who are, again, very influenced by Israel. They don't want him basically to get onto campuses, university campuses, get into the Western media and speak the truth. And the problem they have with those incarcerated unlawfully at Guantanamo Bay is that if they get to the West and they're reprieved and exonerated, they're going to go on speaking tours. And when they go on speaking tours, they're going to really be debunking much of the mythology.
All right, Joshua, so sorry to interrupt you, but we are out of time. Appreciate you being with us out of Calgary. Joshua Blakeney, Press TV's correspondent there. Well, the United States government has inadvertently revealed the details of a top-secret Israeli military base.